Hello and welcome back around the bonfire. It is the show that has never been this happy to lose a bet. It's John and Tim back talking a little bit of Chicago Fire football. As for the first time in both Bonfire and Chicago Fire history, Chicago Fire is victorious in the USMNT Twitter Derby. Chicago Fire taking down Nashville SC 1-0 in Soldier Field on Saturday. A goal in the first 20 seconds and then a whole lot of something for 89 minutes. Tim, it's Monday. We're a little bit late with the holiday, but how are you? How are you feeling in retrospect?
I just want to clarify that I do not bet on MLS games, just to make that perfectly clear. But look, this was on the record with a prediction, and it was not a 1-0 win for the Fire. But man, it was a satisfying win, I think, to
Mm-hmm.
to watch the Fire do. And we're gonna get into it, but I think that this is not a result you would have seen from this team last year. And I think that that's the big takeaway is that this team is finding ways to win that eluded the team last year. And the I don't know that everything is better with the team because the concerns we've talked about already are still this didn't convince me that the Fire's got everything figured out and is, creating a ton of chances through the midfield, right? But you can't argue with results and they're winning ways they couldn't, and I think they can get the other ways back. And so having this extra thing in the bag could really raise the ceiling over the course of, raise the ceiling of over the course of the season.
Look, let's just say there was a reason that one host of this show, they shall remain nameless, did maybe wager a little bit of money on Nashville. I won't say who did it. Probably wasn't Tim. But no, look, and you pointed out there, look, we'll talk about it a little bit. Obviously, Joel Waterman, a scratch late in the day, and Bazeli and Boaze with some flight issues to say the least. Jack Elliott recovering from sepsis, and they pull off 3 points. These are things that simply would not have happened either last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. Who knows, right? But before we dive too deep in, let's talk a few little bits of news. First one, just a little happy celebration. Chris Brady named to the team of the match day for Chicago Fire, starting goalkeeper on that squad after one of the best performances we've seen from him. Certainly, just yet another iconic save on everybody's favorite devil, Hani Mukhtar. And then maybe the more pressing matter, Chicago Fire head to the suburb of Cleveland, Detroit, Michigan, to take on Detroit FC in the U.S. Open Cup on April 14th. That's 6:30 p.m. Central Time, 7:30 p.m. local, but 6:30 p.m. Central Time on April 14th. Chicago Fire take on DC United in the U.S. Open Cup. Hopefully, a little bit of a replay of what we experienced last year at SeatGeek Stadium. But as Chicago Fire fans know, that is how you say never a given, Tim. Never a given.
Cup sets happen, and they happen to good teams. They happen to bad teams more than good teams, but it's not really a cup set if it's, a really good team. It's a little unfortunate that the format doesn't allow, I just would be curious to see how Philly would do against a USL side at this stage. Just this, it sounds like I'm hitting someone while they're down, and I guess I am a little bit. But that would be a game I would definitely have on a screen when it was going on, but we are denied that by the gods of the tournament organizers. I'm giving Nelson Rodriguez way too much power here, aren't I?
There you
But
go.
look, I think it's going to be a fun game.
Yeah.
Ryan Needs came to the Fire from Detroit City. Now the Fire set piece coach, so that's always going to be, a little bit special for him. And nothing like seeing the team play at a stadium whose best days were literally during the Great Depression. So
Oof, oof. All right. Look, hey, look. What matters here is we're all excited to get back into the Open Cup. We are ardent Open Cup supporters, and frankly, we're going to see some Dylan Borso. I feel confident in that. I'm excited to see Dylan Borso play some more football. You
you know what I'm
disagree?
excited for? I
What's
think
that,
this could very easily be Victor Deutsch's first start for the Fire, and I
dude?
I
Oh,
I want to see that level of poop housing ability against Detroit City, a group of people who pride themselves on how tough they are, even though they look like they all come in from whatever community college they teach in driving a Subaru. So
oh my gosh.
I
That's look. We better hope there's not a cup set. Otherwise, that's probably going to end up clipped with Tim behind the wheel of a Subaru somehow. Do you drive a Subaru? You do have
I do
Subaru
not.
vibes. Look,
Oh,
okay,
that's
let's.
okay. All right.
They're great cars. They're great cars. Okay.
Very,
Look,
very reliable.
that's
Great
all
for
you can ask for.
transporting your and your partner's woodworking projects.
Oh
Um,
God. Okay, let's talk a little bit of the game that actually happened. As mentioned before, Philip Zinkernagel knocked in the opener. It was the fastest goal in Chicago Fire history, coming in the 16th second. Am I getting that
17,
right, Tim?
16 going
Ah,
on 17, so 17
yeah.
second technically. Yeah.
You are 16 going on 17 seconds and into the goal. Philip Zinkernagel opening the scoring off a feed from Jonathan Bamba that felt a little bit more like a shot, but I'll credit him and say he was
That was
passing it.
definitely a cross. That was a cross. And,
Real,
also, just the team play, right? Like there were four people involved from kickoff from the Flyers in on that goal,
yeah.
and all four of them deserve a shout out.
Look, there was definitely a bit of a howler there from Nashville, but that is like a real thing, right? Like you see more and more teams treating the kickoff as a set piece, and if that is now what that maybe that's what Ryan is pulling out of his bag. Shout out Ryan Needs, as mentioned before.
Well, I think it's not just that. So like Hugo Cuypers wasn't in this game to set the table a little bit, right? Like Hugo Cuypers wasn't in. He was a late scratch, apparently hurt. Not a late scratch. He was not the latest scratch of the game. Um, so we were told that he was injured late in the week in training. Was not he was not available on the bench. With with Jack Elliott recovering from sepsis, which he had been dealing with, and apparently he lost 8 pounds. We talked about this a little bit. He's not a guy that has 8 pounds to lose. Not 90 minutes fit. He was going to start on the bench. Maybe the plan was to keep Joel in the entire time. Joel Waterman was supposed to get the start. Maybe it was to, give Jack a bit of a run out at some point. That was thrown, a wrench was thrown into that. We were told about it maybe 8 minutes before kickoff or so. That is going to be Jack Elliott, which, like, minor thing, but that also caused the armband to go from Anton Selotros to Jack, which we were not 100% sure was happening. And then a couple of minutes before kickoff, we were told that the winds were strong enough that they wouldn't be doing pyro for like the national anthem, the pregame celebrations, or goal celebrations until they got a clear, and they weren't sure if a clear was going to come. So like a lot of stuff going on, a lot of adversity. The wind was legitimately the like nastiest I've seen it at Soldier Field. It was both strong and also like all four corner flags looked like the wind was going like we're getting moved in different directions, so it looked like it was swirling inside Soldier Field. A lot of adversity, and Fire got off to the best fast start in team history, and it's the game plan, right? Like the plan with no Hugo Cuypers was to have play out of a 4-4-2. Two teams out of a 4-4-2, John. We haven't even mentioned that. Your championship loving self has just got to be so happy at a deep level right now.
it was, gosh, it was unique, and I think maybe that's kind of a good place to start, right? You're talking about a team that overcame adversity. You get the goal early, but then you do have to hang on for 90 minutes against, you know, given the way Miami has looked to start things off, the best attacking team in MLS. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say.
They hadn't trailed all year. They had not. Miami
Yeah,
has trailed several points this season.
they've lost games
Nashville
too,
were
right? Like,
undefeated. They were undefeated in all comps. They made it past Miami in the Champions Cup off of 2 draws and away goal rule. But whatever. Those are the rules of the tournament. It
still.
counts. Man, talk about proper football. Away goals. Two teams in 4-4-2 going at it. The wind is nasty. There's rain. Like proper football. Uh,
Well, look, and this is again, I think important to say, like a team that has given Chicago fits over the years, right? There was a couple stats from I think Nashville directly, like showing like I think Hani Mukhtar and Sam Surge both with more than 5 goals against Chicago Fire in the last 3 years, right? Like these are two not only just great players, players who are consistently great against Chicago, and I think one thing I mentioned to you before we started, Tim, I was struck by the physicality of the game, right? We talked about it against Philly. You knew Philly not the most in form, right? That's maybe a nice way of saying that. You had to get down and dirty with him, and you did. And I think really what stuck out to me watching this game was Nashville wasn't able to progress the ball cleanly. They were holding the ball a lot. They weren't getting a lot of great looks, in part because the Fire were getting stuck in. They were playing the game kind of on the dirt, for lack of a better word, and they were willing to be the bully in a game where they really were not favored or should not
yeah.
have been.
You know, ironically, according to the graphic that they showed on the when I did the rewatch, they
Yeah.
were favored, which says a lot about the way that money is bet in MLS, I guess, more than anything else. I don't know, but they had a game plan and they executed it basically perfectly, right? Like, so no Hugo Cuypers. The reason I was setting all that up was no Hugo Cuypers. They went into a 4-4-2 with Robin Lod and Marin Haile Selassie, and the plan was that the two up top were basically going to press, and neither is going to be a true striker. Like, expecting that was not going to be it, but both of them kind of working off between being a target and sort of being a false nine. And it was Marin's press from the get go that caused a turnover, got the Fire possession. Anton, with in a sea of yellow, gets off basically the only pass that would have connected to anyone in a dangerous place to Jonathan Bamba, who crossed it at exactly the right moment. And Zinck, I mean, he deserves full credit for finishing in his first goal of the year and all of that. Like, he probably had the easiest job out of everyone that I just listed there. I mean, and like, he still
Mhm.
finished it, right? Which is exactly what you need to do. And like, that is not easy to do, but it's like, if that's the easiest thing about all this, that says something about it. And the Fire kept on pressing, like, right? Like, they didn't make it easy. They didn't let up. They did go into a lower block for part of the game. Brady talked about it after the match of like, after 15, 16 minutes in, it looked like the Fire just sort of accepted that this was going to be a defensive game for them. And like, here's what's nuts about it. I think that is fair to say. Like, they did have chances. They had several spurts of good pressure and chances, and you could say that a second would have been fair. And I think if Hugo Cuypers was there, I mean, well, they wouldn't have gotten the first, so who knows? But they could have had a second if they had if it had been a little bit different. But I think team knew it was going to be a defensive game from with the lead, and they looked comfortable doing it, which is the thing that really struck me. Is it was a there were some nervy moments, like there's going to be nervy moments against a team as talented as Nashville, no matter what. But it didn't look like they were nervy about it. Like, it didn't look like they were out of control, and it didn't feel like a car on slick pavement on a bunch of banana peels, the way that the Fire holding a lead often have over the past few years.
You mentioned championship football, right? And like, look, I've watched Preston North End hold the ball for 85 minutes. Literally, I've watched that exact game, but the worst team in the league just trying not to be relegated, just playing keep away as much as they can, and then just sitting in a block. That wasn't what this was, right? I think it's worth pointing out, and please tell me if you disagree, but like, I was struck watching that game. Like, the Fire are the better team, right? Now, will they be the better team over the course of 34 regular season games? Who knows? But on that field on that day, they didn't just look like, okay, we've got a goal, we're good. I think if that game was even after the first minute, you probably feel the same way. They were playing with a level of confidence that they seem to know we have not only a real chance to win this game, we should win this game. That confidence of we will win. And I think that played out over the course of the night.
Yeah, I think it did. And look, I it's a good game plan that was well executed by pretty much everyone. Like, looking through it, like looking through my notes, arguably, arguably the worst performances were from Andrew Gutman and Mbekele Mboaze, and like on the Fire's end, and like
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
like, and I don't necessarily think that either of them were particularly bad, and both did a lot of stuff that was positive as well. And so it's like good performance, good performance, good performance, up and down the pitch, and like everything worked together as a unit.
Let's come back to Andrew Gutman because I do want to talk about him more. We can maybe save that for later on. Let's talk about Mboazi, right? I do want to give some credit where it's due, right? You mentioned this when we were talking to Kendra before the game. Mboazi landed Friday night in Chicago. He had, I think, over 20 hours of travel to get back from South Africa, and that's not even including the day before when he went to the airport, got sent home. So to be able to play over 100 minutes of football right after that is incredibly impressive, and he deserves a ton of credit for that. To your point, maybe not the best game, even if FootMob disagrees with you and would say he was the highest rated anybody who wasn't involved in a goal. Like, uh,
And this is what's sort of funny is when you look at different stats, American Soccer Analysis has him having a negative 0.35 goals added.
and
Part of
I
that's
think
the strategy,
that's
right?
in line.
It's wanting to, it's doing back passes, which was part of the plan of like, it wasn't always keep away, but they did want Nashville to commit before they tried playing the ball forward. It was a kind of weird challenge of like, this is another thing that we heard from the players after the game. you wanted to keep the ball on the ground with how nasty that wind was. And Brady said it really well. It's like, look, I feel like the wind was in our face both sides. And like that seems what happened. It's like the wind switched sides at half to. Um, and
I don't know if you could tell this in the stadium. I was watching at home. You could see it in the clearance attempts, in the long ball attempts. If it was not perfectly low and driven, the ball was hanging up right around midfield. That's why you saw such long stretches of possession in the Fire's defensive end, especially in the second half.
yeah, and like it was weird because it's like on one hand with the kind of game it was like what you wanted to do was like go long, go over the top, and like that's exactly what you couldn't do a lot of the time. It's a little weird, right? Like and you just saw a little bit from both teams, but more from the Fire's end of like there were times that like a couple of times Brady looked like he's just giving it a boot, like a 1980s, like league, like top division in England level, just like guys hoofing it long from the goal, and the wind would catch it, and it would just kind of like stop and go like a third the distance, and Nashville would intercept or whatever, right? Like, and um, I mean, again, it was the wind was not the same for both teams. I think it complicated things differently a little bit for both teams. Um, and maybe some of that got into some of the stuff from Mboazi. He made some mistakes that could have been dangerous. There was a time late. I don't have the minute in front of me, but he flicked the head. He flicked. It became a head. He like headed it off after Nashville set piece, and that made the ball much more dangerous than if he just let it sail past him. And it's like I sort of I get what he was trying to do there, but I think it's the same category that what Greg has talked about with the goalkeeper coming out and playing it. Like if you're gonna commit, you need to be sure. You need to commit and you need to get it right. And not all of those things happen there
Yeah.
from
Look,
Boise.
I rolled this out a little bit pre-show, and I'll get through this, and hopefully this makes sense. I've started in my head to think of Mbuazi a little bit like I heard this great comparison of what's the difference if you watch golf, right? The difference between Scotty Scheffler now and Tiger Woods 20 years ago, and the idea is Scotty Scheffler does not miss hit the ball. He's much more boring to watch. He's just going to play onto the fairway, onto the green, and then he's going to sink the birdie putt. Versus Tiger Woods, who is maybe the best driver when you account for technology and things like that. Not driving the car, driving a golf ball. But his abilities get him into trouble, right? His natural abilities means that he's not afraid to try and shoot something long when a bunker, a hazard is short. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing a bit with Mboaze of his physical abilities, his recovery abilities, his ability to play on the ball in transition are so high that he is willing to take more risks, which can lead to some mistakes. And part of that is just being a young defender. We've talked about that at length, but you're seeing that quite a bit, right? That one great clearance that he has off the back line, I want to say it was off Andy Nahar, but I don't remember who he was running down the field with. Part of that is not great positioning from him. The other half of it is great recovery and the ability to
Yeah.
win the ball, right?
And that's the thing. He is so good, and this is one of the challenges with him that when he makes mistakes, he is often able to make
He
up
is the
for it.
beneficiary of his mistakes at times.
Well, yeah, I mean, he can, yeah, because you see the highlight play after that. But in terms of like what it means for the team and all that, like, and I think even what it means for him, like he knows that he made a mistake. But he's able to clear it up, and so I don't think it's the same lesson as what nobody wants to see, which is the ball ending up in the back of the net. Now, I mean, this is one of the challenges of like developing young players where you can often get away with that in MLS, even against some good players. Sometimes there are players in this league that have the offensive talent to completely torch you. Um, Now, in MLS, if you make that mistake, Mboazi will still be starting the next game. That would not be the case if he was at a level in Europe that would pay him at or above what the Fire are paying him.
Sure, yeah.
Um, and like that's one of the challenge, like so this is in some ways a better league to develop in. In the other, I mean, he was never going to be moved directly to the Premier League, I think, from this and get regular minutes. But if that had been what had happened, one of those mistakes, and you don't see him again for 3 months, right on the
Yeah.
pitch.
No, absolutely. And I think that's where when we've talked about this is the value that MLS brings to a player of his caliber, which is somebody who, look, if he play like like we kind of said about Brian Gutierrez, like if he plays in MLS the rest of his career, that's a disappointment, right? We'd love to have him, but that would be a disappointment for somebody of his caliber. So
At
now,
some point, we're going to have a conversation about whether, if he plays at MLS and at Chivas for the rest of his career, how that ranks up and how that
you know
changes the
what?
math.
The beauty of it is, Tim, I don't ever have to talk about that again unless I want to.
That's fair. Um,
Let's take a step forward in terms of the lines of four men standing on a soccer field. Let's talk a little bit Jay Davila and Anton Saletros. I think we're both. I, I'll talk a little bit about Jay because I think you maybe have a little bit more to say about Anton. Look, we saw one of the best, I think, skills that Carlos Terran had when he was in Chicago was the ability to be a one-on-one defender and take the best player out of the game. Right? We saw him do it against Lionel Messi and some others at times. I thought Jay Davila, the way he was able to control Hani Mukhtar in midfield was impressive to say the least.
you said that, and I was thinking, who got a really stupid yellow? Uh,
Well, Jay did get a yellow in this game, to be fair.
no, he did. He did, and it was a yellow that was well earned. I mean, it was
It
a
was.
number of different things, but again, it was a physical game, and I don't think that anyone begrudges him for the yellow, and I don't think that he is upset about getting the yellow.
It's exactly
But
what
yeah,
you want out of him.
I mean, he was channeling his inner Yaya Toure too. Like he was playing through pressure at a lot of times, and part of it, I think, was the positioning of Anton Saleotros, kind of adjacent to him because it was a 4-4-2 sort of, but it's more of a 4-2-2-2. With it, Jay and Anton being the sort of defensive pairing, and then you sort of had Zinck and Bamba playing closer to being wingers, right? And sometimes typically they were behind, especially in the press, Robin Lod and Martin Haile Selassie, but like not always. Like they would get up and all that. So they had good positioning throughout the game. They were difficult to play through. Like Saleotros had a couple very awesome recoveries. So did
Mm-hmm.
Jay, and I just thought it was a very good performance. And I think that one of the reasons the back line looked as good as it did, I don't think it's the back line. I think it's the defense, right? Because it was a team effort. Like we saw Bamba making some good defensive plays. We saw, Marin made a couple very good defensive plays. And in like defensive play that I talk about way more than I think anybody else is just interrupting things of like keeping things from happening by getting the ball back in different places, right? Like that was happening by guys up and down the pitch. But Anton and Jay, their communication with each other and the way that they were able to support the back line, I think made there was a defensively solid shape and confidence to this performance that it just we didn't see last year. The Fire had some good 0-0 draws that they saw out, you know what I mean? Like they had one against Miami, like they had one against Orlando, like all of that is, down a man against Orlando when it was a different time for Orlando, admittedly. But this felt different than those, right? Like this felt comfortable and confident, and it wasn't just keeping a clean sheet against a good offensive team. It was keeping a clean sheet like you weren't worried about it, for a lot of the game.
Yeah. No, well said. I mean, look, we've talked about kind of some of the experience, some of the youth, and this is like, I think a game like this reminds you of what the goal is with this group, right? Which is the young athletic ability, the scrappiness, the intensity that those guys bring, and the calm, the experience, the Anton Saletros. I was super impressed. You mentioned his recovery. He's a guy who he's probably the least physically gifted of anybody in that back seven, maybe anybody on the field, right? Just in terms of his speed and what he's able to do. But he's smart. He knows where to be, right? Like that's not nothing. Understanding his positioning on the field and where he needs to be to interrupt play. I was very impressed with Anton, and I was not immediately sold on him when he came in. We're starting to see him kind of find his stride and understand the game at this level, which, again, a guy who's played European football in Champions League, Conference League, Europa League, but his club league experience has not been at this level.
Yeah, I mean, the Swedish league is decent, right? I think you're right. Like MLS is probably better, but just regardless of where you're coming from, adapting to MLS
Yes, absolutely.
takes like
I didn't need to take a
from
jab at the
players
Allsvenskan.
from Liga, or like players from La Liga have a period of adapting, and it's not
Yeah,
about
of
the
course.
quality of the team. It's just as about it's a different kind of league, right? Like, and it's a technical league. It's a league that has a lot of offensive skill. It's also a league that is a very physical league, and then like all the other things we talked about. And I'm not going to say, oh, he's fully adapted and it's like he's been here for years, but it looks like he's much more comfortable than a lot of guys would be this quickly. And I think that's impressive. You know, here's the other thing. I wrote about this in the five things I had yesterday. Well, yesterday when we're recording, it came out Sunday. Read it if you haven't. But at the final whistle, the Fire had 6 of their 11 players on the pitch that were 22 or younger. And like that's impressive. And Jason Chokaluk is just too old for that at 23. So that would be, 7 young players. And I mean, look, like that Nashville had 2 on their roster that on their game day sheet for that one, and they only played one at a time because of when subs came on and off. And that you're doing that, some of it was forced, right? Like I don't think that Greg's plan was I'm gonna, I'm gonna put on 17-year-old Christopher Cups while
Yeah.
nursing a 1-goal lead late against one of the best offenses in the league that's frequently torched the Fire. Like that was not the A plan, but the fact that it was not the A plan and it still worked like the A plan, I think says a lot. And the fact that this many young guys are getting trusted with minutes says something. I mean, we didn't see a ton from like Viktor Radojevic. Like he kind of came on as like the team switched to like a back five at that point, and I don't. We didn't see enough of him for me to really rate his performance. He didn't do anything wrong. He didn't really stand out either way for me.
No, but we also, there is something to the effect of when we've seen him, it's been positive, and that's not nothing. Look, I think the one
I
kind of
just
young
looked it up.
guy who
He had 2 touches. I'm not gonna rate a guy based on those 2 touches.
yeah, I'm going to rate him 1 thumbs up because you helped us.
Yeah.
No, I think the
mean,
one young guy we haven't
Fire
talked
are
about, and
undefeated when he's played.
that is true. There was a Jonathan Dean stat like that for a while, so be careful. Good luck. The one young guy we haven't talked about, and maybe I don't know if we want to wrap on this, but we definitely need to talk Chris Brady, right? I'll let you start because I feel like I've got some things to say that are not Fire related. Outstanding performance from Chris. Obviously, saved 2 points on a single shot against Hani Mukhtar in. I don't know, man. Is that a moment that if you're looking around the league, like, is there somebody you trust more than Chris Brady lining up against a free kick? I don't know who that would be.
We asked him about the free kick because obviously after the game,
You
and
don't say.
look, it was sort of one of those things where like we were asked who the man of the match was in the press box, before. This is going to be a fan vote. I think they had a fan vote thing out in Stadium. I think from now on it's just going to be the fan vote. So those of you that are there, vote because that will decide, and
That's cool.
you don't want it to be people that have worse taste than you voting.
We've seen what
But
happens when that goes wrong.
yeah. So look, and he said, we asked, I think it was Joe that was like, well, what were you thinking about? Like, it felt sort of like the Messi thing, like the Messi free kick last year. And he's like, actually, I was thinking about, a free kick from Hani Mukhtar 3 years ago. Do you guys remember that? And like, it's such a funny thing to put to a bunch of reporters. Like, do we remember? Like, I don't remember what I had for dinner 4 hours ago, man. Like it's been a long day already. But like it was almost an identical free kick in almost an identical spot, and it was like the same thing of like trying to go up above the wall and dip in exactly the same way, and he read it perfectly. And to your point, that says exactly what like the fact that he's thinking about the same player and he's like the same guy free kick 3 years ago. He probably saw game tape and stuff like that to review, but still that level of preparation, I think, says a lot about the way that he takes the games. Not that other goalies don't do that, but that he did it and he executed based on it, I think says a lot.
Tim, you talked about in the context of his contract this offseason, the Fire kind of placing a bet on Chris Brady, right? Saying, we're going to pay you like a starting level goalkeeper, even though you are 18 years old and we don't know what you're going to be yet. We believe in you enough for that. He's thinking of a free kick from 3 years ago. He turned 22 a month ago. He has been starting in this league this is his 3rd year as the full-time starter, and he's 22 years old. That's insane, right? And that's the kind of stuff you would expect to hear from somebody who is Josh Cohen's age, not necessarily something you expect to hear from somebody who is Chris Brady's age, right? At least in my head. Yeah, that's impressive to hear. I didn't know you guys had that conversation with him, so I'm caught off guard by that. To just like switch gears a little bit here, I didn't tell you I was going to do this, but I'm going to do it because frankly, I want to put it on social media. There's not a reason Chris Brady should not start at the World Cup. I'm sorry. Like I don't think Matt Freese, Matt Turner, Zach Steffen, Patrick Schulte, Roman
I don't
Celentano
think
is
Zach
good.
Steffen is. I don't think Zach
Yes,
Steffen
yeah,
is in the
no,
running, especially after this
fair.
weekend.
He had a tough
Again, I
weekend.
don't want to kick guys while they're down, but my
I
God,
think he's
uh,
better than he was this weekend, but yeah, tough weekend for Zach Steffen. I don't think you
especially
can
because the
point.
thing for Zach. Well, here's the argument, right? Like the argument is Matt Freese is better with his feet. I think Matt Freese also is a very good shot stopper. I'm just going to put that out there. Um, the argument for Zach Steffen, we saw Zach Steffen for years starting for the USMNT, and this is not a criticism of Greg because he obviously was Greg's player for both at club level and at the national team level. But it was he's good with his feet, and then he lets in an own goal like he did this past weekend off of his feet. Like that's
That was I do want to get that was a really tough play. Like he's getting the ball cleared back to him from his own player from midfield. He can't touch it, right? He has to play it with his feet. He's not used to that either. Okay, yes. Bad play from Zach Steffen. I shouldn't
no,
defend
he
it.
was choosing how to take it, and he was being casual about it, like he was going to like just getting ready to kick
Fair.
it
He
forward
was
rather than
trying to be a little
stopping the
cool,
ball.
yeah.
If he had done what a goalkeeper that knew he was not as good would have done, if he had done what a nervous goalie in their first start at that level had done, given that same positioning, that ball would have been stopped dead by their feet. Like it would have
Okay.
been, they would have stopped it.
Let's
Now,
let's move on from this
yeah.
because
So
this
my
is
point
not
is,
entire.
I my thing with goalies, especially in something like the World Cup, is you want like the USMNT's World Cup fate is ultimately probably not going to get decided by building out of the back beautifully, right? Like that. There's teams that the USMNT should expect to get some results against. Now the group stage is going to be interesting just with who they're facing, and then there's some teams like what we saw from the US against Belgium, against the Netherlands, against when you start facing higher end opponents where you just need a guy that can keep the ball out of the back of the net, and
That's
that's the thing. And the shot stopping ability that I think Brady has is as good as anyone in the league.
I think he is very and you people I think reasonable minds can disagree, but I feel confident in my opinion on this. I think he is clearly the best natural shot stopper not only in MLS but of American goalkeepers. I don't think it's particularly close.
Well,
And I think Matt Freese is
in
very
this
good.
point,
Do
those
not
are
get me wrong.
close to being synonymous because Nottingham
Yeah,
Forest
they
has
pretty much.
summarily ruined the careers of pretty much
Diego
everyone else in the
Coquen made
pool.
the bench, actually, Tim. Thank you very much. No, look, I don't think the gap between what a Matt Freese offers you with his feet between to what Chris Brady does is big enough to make up that gap. And I've been incredibly critical of Mauricio Pochettino for a lot of reasons. I think not taking Chris Brady would be maybe the worst decision you can make. I think not starting him would be a close second.
I don't think that he starts. He hasn't started with the I think that
I'm not saying
but
he will. I'm
regardless,
saying he should, just to be clear.
I look, I think that after performances like this, it has been 3 clean sheets. Now, clean sheets are a team stat, right? Like they're not just on the goalie, and I think the team gets a lot of credit. And I think one of the reasons that Brady is maybe not as much in the conversation for is he the second goalie? I think that Patrick Schulte is probably in that. Like Roman Celentano may also sort of be dark horse candidates for being a second goalie candidate. They haven't been having great seasons, right? Teams in front of them have not been good, and this is exactly my point. Brady did not have a good team in front of him early in his career as a starter. He now does. And last year he had a good team offensively in front of him, but not a good team defensively because the Fire let in a ton of goals. And this is the first time that he's actually had a very stout feeling defense in front of him. And that will be the benefit, like his career prospects going forward, whether it's staying with the Fire, whether it's potentially moving on. He is just on a new contract, and so that could go either way, though, right? Like in terms of the Fire now have more leverage for selling him on, goes up by just playing in front of a better team because clean sheets are a good stat. But it's there's something that I think everyone notices. They're hard to ignore, and if you keep on keeping a clean sheet in half your games, I think it's very hard to look at a guy and say we haven't seen everything we've needed from you.
Yeah, and look, while I wouldn't say 100% of the clean sheet is on him, obviously, like it is a team stat. Every single one of these, what you're seeing is multiple key saves from Chris Brady, right? Whether it's the free kick, the very end of the game when Christopher Cups is a little bit out of position, and not necessarily even a criticism of Christopher, like it just tough ball to play, and Chris Brady finds his way to the back post to save that last shot, right? Like we're talking 3 or 4 times in multiple games at this point that he is making key deciding saves or keeping the team in games with his ability to stop shots. Yeah. So look, I know I would never pretend I'm not biased on something like this, because I certainly am. I watch him every week and I know the player he is and the person he is. But he is, I think it would be a mistake not to have him starting in net when July or June rolls around, I should say. Tim, I think that probably pushes us to where we want to finish unless there's anything else you want to talk on before we maybe do a little man of the match.
No, I think that's pretty much, yeah,
Yeah.
good place
You
to roll
want
on.
to You want to give your man of the match here? I think I
I
know
mean,
who it's going to be,
it's
but
the man of the match, right? It's Chris
yeah,
Brady. Like it has to be. Now, if we stop the polling at the 73rd minute or something, well, I guess that was after the free kick. If at the 70th minute, if we stop the polling, like there would be some other candidates. But I think when you look through the end of second half stoppage time, it has to be Chris Brady. Like he did more to get the result than anybody else, and I'm including the four guys that got the goal.
yeah. See, I let you go first so I could talk about the guy I wanted to talk about because obviously it's Christopher Brady. But I want to give a little bit of love to Andrew Grootman. You said pregame, early in this, not his best performance. And while I wouldn't disagree, I thought, especially late in the game, his defensive maneuver, like coming into that back three, and even early, I thought he was great defensively, and the team needed that.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And people are like, he's not good at defending. Then I've had that. So many people have DM'd me about it multiple times, and I've said he's better defending than you think he is. And
Mm-hmm.
just rewatch everything that he does. And look, if he's playing up like a winger like he does, he's not always going to be in a position to make, to be playing defensively the way that a guy is staying home a lot more would.
He's like the Luka Doncic of MLS, you know? It's like he's giving so much of his energy to the attack that yeah, he's not always going to play defense because he needs to be forward, but when he needs to be back, he's very very good at what he does. And especially late in that game, he was a menace on the back line. He was great in the air, and I wish I had pulled his aerial duel numbers and I didn't, so I apologize. But great
He's
performance.
technically 1 for 1, but I have some significant questions about the way that aerial duels are counted by
I can think of
MLS
like
stat
four
provider.
off the top of my head.
Yeah. Oh no, trust me, I know. There was a game featuring Benteke last year when I looked at the aerial duels the day after, so this wasn't even like the stats aren't in yet, and it said there were none in the game, and I'm like, okay, well that's
This
not
is
what I saw when I was there in person. So
God. Love that. Love that.
yeah,
Yeah, look, I think there were probably, to your point, Tim, probably 5 guys you could have picked out of that lineup. So we didn't even talk about Jonathan Bamba, Philip Zinckernagel, Martin Haile Selassie, who were all fantastic at different
we did it
levels on
early on,
Saturday.
right, with that opening goal, and that was the
Yeah, I
biggest
just
thing.
mean
They
in
kept on
depth,
doing all those things. They kept, yeah, I thought Bamba had the like he would have been my man of the match if it wasn't for Brady, not just because of the work that he did setting up the goal, but because of how good he was
Man,
throughout the pitch for over 100 minutes.
if you want to know why Tim and I were talking a lot
Well,
about
99
Jonathan
minutes.
Bamba this offseason and what he can bring, I think you've seen it through the first 6 matches. He's been outstanding. Look, it's really hard to justify $5 million salary in MLS. He's earning it, right? He maybe not 100%, but he is as close as I think he's ever been. He's playing really, really well.
And he showed what like the thing the Fire need of like when you don't necessarily have a number 10 who's going to like win games for you. You need somebody that can dribble past people very, very
Yeah.
well. And he was dribbling past a pretty good Nashville defense.
Yeah, his take-ons have been much improved. Much improved. He simplified his game a little bit, which I think has helped him in terms of just handling the ball. But anyway, look, let's wrap up there. As always, thank you for tuning in, for listening. You can stay tuned to menofred97.com. That's where you'll find the 5 things that Tim posted, 5 things we learned from Nashville, this game against Nashville SC, and stay up to date on all the other news reporting and sometimes feature stories. Alex Calabresi was just out in Switzerland visiting FC Lugano, so he's a piece up on that. Would recommend giving that a read as well if you haven't. It's also where you can just stay up to date on all things Chicago Fire soccer. So stay tuned there. You can also follow us on all the socials, Men in Red 97, anywhere and everywhere that you consume content. We'll be there posting, sharing, all the good stuff. If you can give us a follow there. And then wherever you're listening, if you could like, subscribe, thumbs up, whatever it is, it goes a longer way than you would realize if you're on YouTube. If you could subscribe there, we'll have more live programming, things like hot takes coming out later in the year. So we're looking forward to continuing to share that. That will continue to evolve and stuff too. So we're excited to share more video content, YouTube and across the socials as well. And last but not least, thank you so much for tuning in. For our illustrious producer Austin, for Tim, I'm John. Thank you so much for joining us around the bonfire. And come on, you Men in Red.